I want to be clear. I did not know, nor have I ever had a conversation with the man that we talk about in this story. So any secondhand information that hasn't been confirmed will be considered a rumor, half truth, or just 100% false. You're going to learn of a man who for 48 hours in the year of 2015 had a few drug dealers on the Southside of Richmond scared to answer their phones. A man known as Anwar Rowland Phillips, aka Wawa.
We never really had a sound.
This is Mel the mic right here. We're in the heart of Richmond, VA.
They got gangs, roaches.
Yes, it was the deadliest invasion since the Civil War.
Killers, dope.
Drug-related shootings in Richmond.
We knew what we couldn't do, so we were forced to be original.
By 2015, Anwar could be described as the type to never back down from nothing or nobody. Either that be gunplay or using his hands. He's a skinny frame guy, standing over 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, had a short fuse and didn't discriminate over what gender you were, along with a drug habit with his regular use of cocaine. Now we know all too well how newspapers and publications can get information overly wrong, but it's said in several news reports, Wawa is allegedly known to be a part of a gang. Now in which gang? We're not too sure. He does rock 1 or 2 teardrops under his right eye, and past conversations and documentaries prove that ink like that could mean a list of things, including a gang. But before we go any further, let's rewind back to where it all started for Anwar Phillips. Because of what most of us know today, we can only imagine childhood for Anwar being on the rougher side of life. You know, it's that nature versus nurture sort of thing. What's already inside you versus what you pick up from people and your environment along the way. Like everyone, he had several influences growing up, and the best of those influences may as well be his grandparents, a preacher and a preacher's wife, who owned several churches, with one being in Maryland and another being in Virginia. And that believer mentality was passed down to his mother, who was very spiritual herself. It's said that his father was never around, but that wouldn't stop his mother from equipping Anwar with a militant mentality at an early age. Principles, morals, values, traits that are normally instilled by men. So as mama did her damnedest to play both roles, she also had to endure a few life struggles of her own. We don't know exactly when these events would take place, just that Anwar was still considered to be an innocent kid. During those tougher times, they'd bounce from motel to motel until his mother landed a spot in Section 8 housing. Overall, Anwar grew up in the uptown area of Southside, with Forest Brook Apartments being home base. We don't know the exact timeline on when they moved there or how long they stayed, but he spent a large portion of his childhood here. But after a certain age, he would always find himself behind bars. And this all took a turn the year 1997, at the age of 12 years old. Now Anwar would come into contact with a guy by the name of Mike. Being a little older than him by 3 years, he'd say he took a liking to Anwar, noticing he had some of the same qualities as the other guys he hung around. But it's the way they met that would be as bizarre as the Wawa story itself. Mike noticed Anwar pointing a shotgun toward his mother, and on impulse, he runs over, taking the gun from his hands before he could cause any damage. All we know is there was some sort of argument between the two and nothing else. But Mike and Anwar would be the best of friends ever since. After hearing that story, you think of all the normal ways us in society has befriended someone off the cuff. Could be a person at work who offered a lighter during break time, or being introduced as a mutual friend at a cookout. But as weird as it may sound, the best relationships are forged through turmoil, pain, or in layman's terms, fucked up situations. So to be clear, we don't know the intricate details on why he had that weapon on his mother that day, but it's known by those closest to him that he loved his mother dearly, more than anything or anyone. Doesn't mean Anwar's reckless nature would stop there. Just 3 years later, he'd have the experience of shedding blood for the first time. Like a lot of us, he got into smoking weed by 13 and 14 years old. About the same time, he started hustling as well, skipping the line straight to selling crack. And his militant mentality played a large role in his ability to make money, already having the discipline it took to maintain a small operation. And eventually, he'd run into a young white boy around his age by the name of White Dog. White Dog was from the same area, living in the Woodbriar apartments, and the way he grew up mirrored the upbringing of Anwar himself. So with them having a lot in common, he would become one of Wawa's best of friends. As time went on, the two hustled together, both making a good amount of money for the age that they were. We fast forward almost a year ahead, and we're in the late 90s, a time where the corner boy method wasn't fully obsolete, but it was dying out, as new technology and techniques from law enforcement made it harder for the corner boys to grind. But Anwar and White Dog were just minutes away from a well-known hotspot off Midlothian Turnpike, a place where motels and hotels set aside and across each other like its own little neighborhood, a place that once it has you, you hooked. And that went for the buyer and the seller. So here they were, trapping out the hotels day and night, 24/7, with everything they needed being close by. They were young, but knew the game through and through, going smooth as can be, and then it happened. On one fateful night, they rented a room at the Econo Lodge where the old Waffle House once stood. They're fooling around this night, playing with the gun when it suddenly goes off, hitting White Dog in the neck. Anwar, not knowing what to do, he panicked and left the scene. He ran back to the block where Mike and the older kids were, telling them what just took place. He was angry that it even happened, because by no means did he want it to hurt his friend. So call it taking responsibility or him just feeling guilty, but not long after, Anwar turned himself in. And even though he came forward, he would still receive juvenile life for the shooting, being off the street for the next 3.5 to 4 years. But through it all, White Dog did survive it. He recovered 100%, went back to their neighborhood to pick up where he and Anwar left off, eventually taking off in the drug game, making as much money as the streets was willing to pay. He would later lead a similar life as Anwar, the same as they grew up, with jail time, drugs, federal charges and all. But this isn't White Dog's story. We now head into the beginning of the end for Anwar Rowland Phillips. When you notice young boys with violent tendencies at such an early age, one of the first thoughts to come to mind is abuse, lack of attention and love in the home, or even mental instability, which we have no record or proof that Anwar experienced any of those issues, so it's all speculation for now. Anwar has now reached the legal age of 18, being released from juvie in late 2003. By now, he had picked up a coke habit, something he liked to do while he hustled, and not long after, he would officially become a convicted felon in the eyes of the law. Months later, on the day of March 8, 2004, Anwar, who sat behind the wheel of a stolen van, was stopped for a traffic violation. Now, at some point during the stop, he sped away from the officer, taking him on a high-speed chase. He soon after crashed the vehicle into a tree off the 900 block of Green Ridge Drive. As the officer approached the vehicle, he noticed Anwar lying across the passenger seat with his hands beneath him. He ordered him to show his hands several times before forcibly pulling him up from the seat. Anwar suddenly pushed the officer to the back seat, now upping his weapon, a .38 caliber revolver. He let off 2 shots. Afterward, the officer knocked the gun out of his hands, in which time Wawwa tried reaching for the officer's gun on his hip. They get into a brief struggle until his backup arrived, now restraining him long enough to put him in cuffs. Now, he was originally charged with attempted capital murder of a police officer, auto theft, and use of a firearm by a convicted felon. 7 months down the line in October of 2004, he received a reduced charge of attempted murder under a plea agreement that was negotiated by his lawyer and the Commonwealth's attorney. In the end, he was sentenced to 22 years with 15 years suspended, having 7 years total to serve behind the wall of a state prison. And considering the offense, you can certainly say they showed Anwar some mercy. It's the year 2010, the start of a new decade. Richmond got a new baseball team called the Flying Squirrels. We celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Richmond 34 sit-in, an event that took place the year 1960. And it's also the year I myself will graduate from Huguenot High School. So yeah, it was a hell of a year for the city and the people who lived in it. But ain't nothing abnormal about it. It's called life. And all that time don't seem too important because you live in it in real time. But that's only until time is all you have. The only thing that'll guarantee your freedom or the chance to see your loved ones again. So you can imagine how Anwar felt being released back into society. He coasted several months after coming home without any run-ins with the law. But that would soon come to an end after getting into an altercation with the young woman he was dating at the time. On the day of April 10th, 2011, Wawwa would be at his then girlfriend's apartment named Bubbles, who lived in Blue Ridge Estates. This was another area he was familiar with the motels he trapped out of being just a walk up the block, and the neighborhood he grew up in just a 5-minute drive away. We can only speculate that this situation derived from an argument that escalated too far, but whatever it was or why, Anwar was angry enough to pistol whip his girlfriend several times. Armed with a gold 9mm Beretta, he'd end up breaking her face in multiple places. He would appear in the gotcha paper with a warrant for aggravated assault. The gotcha paper was a local news publication that was very popular in the late 2000s and the early 2010s. It published all the latest arrests, and you almost always saw somebody you knew, or at the very least was familiar with. Anwar's carrying on like regular, hustling, making moves as always, until one day he's pulled over while either on the way or just leaving one of his plays. And upon running his name, the warrant pops up. Whether he knew or not was unknown. They would then search him in the vehicle and found drugs hidden inside the car. He was later convicted on driving on suspended license, possession of narcotics, and aggravated assault, causing him to spend the next 3.5 years in prison. Now at the age of 26, Anwar has already spent 11 years of his time on earth behind bars, which is almost a literal half of his life, and with this new sentence, adds up to 15 years total. During this current bid, he would face more than one problem, as did the majority, if not all, inmates inside. As we just learned, Anwar was no stranger to incarceration. If anything, this was like coming home after a year on the streets. But there is one altercation that almost ended in the worst way. A situation that we only know about because of a fellow South Richmond native named Jay Williams. He had told this story on his YouTube channel years after coming across Wawa during his own 10-year bid. And with Jay's blessing, this would be his account of the following events. One day, Anwar is out on the yard walking the track, and along comes another inmate who we'll call Brandon, running laps, and he accidentally bumps into Wawa. They would have words with one another, which escalated to name calling, leading to them almost getting into it right then and there. But the guards on scene would intervene before anyone came to blows. Now Brandon, he was already familiar with how Anwar operated, figuring it was no chance in the situation dying down or blowing over. So he in turn decided to prepare for the worst, collecting all the magazines he could to use as a vest. Because if you knew Anwar, you knew he put that blade on you without a second thought. Now Brandon's cellmate, who was Jay, would confront him about some magazines of his that went missing.
He was like, I was running laps today and I bumped into dude and we had words and dude wants to take it there. I said, who? And he said the name of a guy that I knew, a guy we call Anwar. I said, you got into it with Anwar? He was like, yeah. I was like, come on, man, chill. I'm gonna holler at him and try to, die it down. He's like, nah, it ain't gonna die down. He's like, I called him all types of names. He called me all types of names, and shit almost popped off on the yard right then and there, but the guard intervened, seen it, yelled at us, so we went our separate directions. Now, Anwar sleeps in another building. He stays in the building next to our building, and the pod's over there. I said, why you think it's going to go to knife play? He was like, because you already know how Anwar gets down, which he was right. I knew that when it came to it, Anwar pushed that blade inside the prison, right? He'd take your ass up out of here. Skinny dude, black dude, wasn't the biggest dude, but he would fight. But he'd been done that so much that he was past that fighting. It was known. If we're going to go at it, I'm just going to stab the shit out of you.
And after Brandon explained the situation to him on why he took them, Jay offered to talk with Wawa before Brandon goes to confront him, as both Wawa and Jay were from the same area and also parlayed with the same guys behind the wall. But Jay would later say if it came down to it, he'd stand on his loyalties to his celly, even if it meant going against the Richmond guys he rocked with. So before Jay and Brandon goes out for rec the next day, them both would strap up, just in case Jay's planning on killing the issue goes awry.
So I said, look, when we go out today, let me holler at him before you push up on him. Like, I'm not trying to see it go there, man. I'm thinking in my mind, we're both gonna get jammed up, because I gotta take a knife out with me on the yard now, because I'm rocking with you, but I rock with dude. I'm caught in the middle. I gotta have a way to defend myself.
So the time comes. Anwar soon arrived on the yard with a few guys, and Jay did as he said and approached Anwar. Right off the bat, he denied Jay's attempt to play the peacemaker, saying that Brandon was out of pocket. So after negotiating a bit more, Jay suggested they fight to settle their issues. Anwar agrees. Then a moments later, Anwar and Brandon were trading blows in the corner of the yard.
They square off, they go to rumbling. It's how it's supposed to be. After maybe a minute, they're just more or less getting tired, trading blows, grabbing each other and tussling. We split them up. It's not going nowhere. The fight's over. Now y'all just pretty much exhausted and winded out, right? It died right then and there. They fought. That's what it was. Both of them, we good. You good? Yeah, I'm good. You good? Yeah, I'm good. It died. My cellmate and him ended up walking the track after they fought and talking. Look, bro, you know, you can't talk to me like that. Like, I got a name in here. I got to hold my name. I'll let you talk to me like that. Dudes are going to come out the woodworks thinking they can carry me. And when it comes time to sell this or that, they're not going to try to pay because they think I'm weak. Like, well, you can't get off on me like that. Like, it is what it is. They squashed it. Everything died down.
So from this situation alone, it's proven that Anwar had a sense of reasoning. But there were those on the outside who felt that that part of him didn't exist at all. Now, at the time of Anwar's release in early 2015, 5 months goes by before I myself would hear the name Wawa. Now, if you guys would like to hear the full story in its entirety by Jay Williams himself, the video link will be down below in the description box. Anwar was now 30 years old, living in the bottom of Southside of Chicago Manor Apartments inside of Blackwell. At this very moment, he was still young enough to change, lead a better life with many more years ahead of him. But that wasn't the road he chose. Now on November 10th of that year, it's a little before 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and a call about a shooting would send officers to the 1400 block of Talbot Drive.
And that breaking news out of Richmond, where a man's been murdered on the city's south side. I'm Bill Fitzgerald.
I'm Candace Burns. Let's go right to our Rob Desir, who is live on Talbot Drive off of Hopkins Road, where that man was shot and killed tonight. Rob, what can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right, Candace. Police right now are investigating a homicide here on Richmond South Side on Talbot Drive. Now, they've received a call a little after 10 o'clock this evening, and they arrived on the scene quickly about 2 minutes later, according to police, where they found a man who was dead on arrival from multiple gunshot wounds. That's multiple gunshots is what they were reporting. Forensics right now is on the scene investigating the body. It is no witnesses, and they have no suspects at this time. We're being told by police that this is a relatively quiet neighborhood, so there are a lot of questions as to why this man was found dead here on the scene. So police will know a little bit more in the morning. That's what they say, but we have.
In the heat of the moment, no one had a clue what happened. Just that a 30-year-old man by the name of Rolando Salas, aka Ro, would be lying on the side of the road with multiple gunshot wounds, pronouncing him dead on arrival. And authorities wouldn't know it yet, but Wawa would be the one responsible for his death. Now, the reason Anwar decided to murder this man is a story of its own. There were rumors of someone intending on robbing and possibly killing Anwar, adding that if Anwar's mother was there, to kill her as well. And Rolando's name would be brought up as one of the people that could be involved, claiming that there was this supposed text thread confirming it. But who's to say Rolando himself wasn't set up? What if the person trying to rob Anwar spread the rumor to deflect attention from himself? Or the text thread never existed, and there was something totally different going on between the two. But as I said before, this was only a rumor and not an actual fact, including family members denying the accusation from the beginning. It would be anyone's guess on the actual reason, but whatever that was, Anwar believed it to be true enough to where he conjured up a plan to deal with it. Because before he took Rolando's life, a list was created, a list of names with everyone who's allegedly involved with the setup, even those who had an indirect hand in it. But it wouldn't stop there, because he would add even more names, including anyone who had done him wrong, stolen from him, even those who were just talking about the situation. The man's sole intentions was to get rid of any and all detractors and witnesses. In his mind, they all had to die, with Rolando Salas unfortunately being the first of the many he planned to unalive. As days passed, they struck out on gaining leads for a suspect, and the horrible news of more bodies dropping around the city just made the case that much harder to work. It's nearly a week later, and many wouldn't know of Anwar's whereabouts or where he was spending his time. But we do know that during the early hours of the day on November 16, 2015, Anwar, fresh off the murder of Rolando Salas, decided to go get a haircut. But of course, he wouldn't go to your average barbershop up the block. He'd go to an individual from the neighborhood, a man who was well known for his barbering skills, while also having a private location where he serviced his customers. The perfect place for a killer on the run, because now he can get a fresh lineup and stay low-key at the same time. So as the barber did his job, the same as he did on any other day, Anwar would reach into his pocket, pulling out what almost looked like a notepad, but had the appearance of a black and white composition book. It was just a smaller version of it. He then turns to a page with a list of names inside. Now it was widely speculated throughout the city that Wawwa wasn't just randomly killing people. These weren't in the heat of the moment type of situations where an argument might have went left or Anwar having to defend himself. Not at all. There were rumors of this alleged hit list, and this moment would definitely confirm it. Now who or how many names were on said list is still a mystery, with it even being rumored that his mother's name was on that list as well. But that in itself was always false from the beginning. So as the barber continued his cut, Anwar would scratch off one of the names on the list, assuming it to be the man he murdered a week prior. And he would then say, "Gotta look good before I kill me a nigga." Words that would shock anyone who painstakingly had to hold those clippers. After his haircut, he paid and he left, like any regular human being would. But without this barber never knowing that the man leaving his chair intended to make good on those words. Now through my days of hustling, I ran across many guys in the streets. It got to a point where I would have over 200 plus contacts in my phone. And today, I can't say I know even a fraction of those guys, but it's a reason for it. When doing business in the street, some of us have this underlying idea that you know someone because you've seen them 20 times a week for the past year or so. But that term, "it's just business," couldn't be more real. A customer of mine who we'll call Freddie came by the cop and was telling me about the recent events happening in the city. Events where a few people were killed. Now by living in Richmond my entire life, hearing about a murder or someone being killed across the street wasn't abnormal as it may sound to others. But because I wouldn't know the full details, I would just brush it off like any other day. Now I'm pretty sure if you've ever been the neighborhood weed man, that sometimes you felt like a full-on therapist. A lot of folks would either tell you their problems or gossip about the next person in a negative light, which I myself wasn't too fond of. I took the stance of not wanting to be told anything I'm not supposed to know, which is ironic considering the current situation. Now Freddie, he spoke up Wawwa's name about possibly killing a few individuals. The word on the streets traveled so fast, you didn't know if he unalived 3 people or 13. And Freddie almost bragged about it, lightweight praising the man for being quote unquote crazy, further saying what he'd do if Wawwa ever tried him in the same manner. So me being me, I disregarded everything he said before escorting him out. And while doing so, there stood another customer who we'll call Percy. I noticed this aggressive face expression Percy had toward Freddie as he walked out. After Percy closed the door, he asked if I knew that the door was cracked open a bit, basically informing me of hearing every word that Freddie spoke. But I hadn't much thought about it, being that Freddie wasn't there long at all. Then he went on to say that Freddie knew better to speak on Wawwa, knowing exactly what he'll do to him if he had found out. Now unbeknownst to me, Anwar called Freddie's phone just 10 minutes before knocking on my door. While in the car alongside Percy, his phone rang with the contact name reading Wawwa across the screen, where he refused to pick up the phone, wanting no dealings with the man. He did business with them plenty of times in the past because, as we know, Wawwa had a coke habit. So the assumption was him attempting to cop some more soft. But not even the money was enough for Freddie to risk his own life. Percy would imply that he and Wawwa were tight, saying it only took one call and Freddie would be a dead man. And as always, I listened and I disregarded, not even realizing the gravity of the situation. I also couldn't have guessed that Anwar would be the topic of conversation around the neighborhood later that same day. Later into the night, Anwar made way to my neighborhood, a neighborhood he knew all too well, and that was Blue Ridge. Now Blue Ridge has been around since the year 1980, back when one of the most notorious complexes, Jefferson Village, once stood right next door. Blue Ridge was one of those places you couldn't really claim. Folks from all over the city would sometimes reside here, which also led to a lot of bloodshed over the years. So there I was, using my own home as a one-stop trap spot. And by sundown, it was a regular Monday night as any, laying back with my woman after putting her son to sleep, which was around 8:30. But an hour later, sirens and police lights would engulf the entire area. He was inside an apartment that was having a birthday party off of Red Ash Drive, a section of building set toward the very back of the complex. It said that Anwar knew the family of the folks living there, and inside was a 49-year-old man named Frank McCray, aka Skip, another man who was Frank's nephew, a woman, and a 7-year-old girl. What he'll do next inside this apartment would traumatize all individuals involved. Now it's said that Anwar entered through the back patio door of the apartment and immediately started shooting, with one person being the woman who survives the ordeal without being harmed. Frank was found unresponsive and pronounced dead at the scene, while the other unknown man and his daughter were carted off to safety. At that very moment, I was exiting my apartment and I watched as the little girl was being put inside of their ambulance. The man and little girl would thankfully survive the shooting, but would unfortunately mourn the loss of their family member Frank after receiving the news of his death. Not even 2 hours later, detectives were called to St. John's Woods Apartments that sat directly behind Blue Ridge for another homicide, not far from the entrance of the complex. It was just after midnight when neighbors heard gunshots, and when officers arrived, they found the body of a 33-year-old woman named Ashley Davis inside the woods, just yards away from her apartment door. Now, her death is significant because both situations were so close in time and location, it was initially thought to be related. Anwar was already named as the prime suspect in the triple shooting in Blue Ridge and the murder of Rolando. So until they found additional evidence, they thought he was good for this one too. But not long after, police had a person of interest in Ashley's death, releasing a photo to the public from CCTV cameras, thus eliminating Anwar as the sole suspect. Sometime after the triple shooting in Blue Ridge, Anwar would talk to one of his childhood friends, and that friend would ask him about the little girl. You know, how did he feel about it? Was he remorseful? Did he try to kill her? Was it an accident? But it was Anwar's response that would make this friend keep his distance for a while, which in turn put himself on the list as well. And Anwar would say verbatim, "When at war, there's no limit." By November 20th, 2015, Anwar had been on the run for days, and the U.S. Marshals offered a $5,000 reward for information that led to his arrest. Now, he may have still been on the run had he not ventured off to Henrico County, making a stop inside Ex's Village Apartments along the 100 block of Ingleside Drive. It was around 6:45 a.m. when Anwar's rampage came to an end. Anwar's plan was to link up with one of his suppliers, a man who we'll call Ike. He had been running low on coke and told him he just wanted to re-up, but how could he really know? The word has spread throughout Richmond about everything he's done thus far, with the 7-year-old girl recovering from a gunshot wound striking a nerve in a lot of folks in the city. He had also heard about this hit list, getting word that Wawwa wasn't to be trusted at all. And who knows, maybe Ike's name was up next, and he refused to bet his life on it. So upon arriving to Ike's apartment door, Ike had a choice to make, and he chose the latter, electing to take him down before Anwar could make him another number. Armed with a shotgun, he fired, and Anwar was down. Like anyone, we guessed that Anwar's thought process in real time had to be that you're gonna die. But also in that moment of him bleeding out, he opened a bag of coke and snorted as much powder as he could, clogging his arteries in the process, which also slowed down the bleeding. And as bizarre as it may sound, that specifically is what would save his life. Whether this was some quick thinking or him wanting one last blast before he died, Anwar Phillips would live to see another day. The gunshots woke the entire complex, with one neighbor opening his door to see 2 pistols lying on the ground, recalling hearing a neighbor above him saying, "I just shot somebody." Anwar had crawled his way out of the apartment building by now, and as he sat up against the wall, he repeatedly asked the residents outside for a cigarette. He had become a victim of his own doing, fighting for his life. It was without question meant for him to die that night.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Cheryl Miller. This just in. The man federal marshals warned us about in connection with a recent triple shooting is now in custody after being shot himself. Anwar Wawa Phillips had been wanted for killing a man at a birthday party and injuring a 7-year-old girl and another man earlier this week. Feds say Phillips was so bad you needed to keep away from him if you saw him, and they offered a reward to find his location. CBS 6's Jake Burns tells us they captured Wawa Phillips this morning after another shooting in Henrico County. Jake?
Yes, Cheryl, police confirmed that man shot over in Henrico this morning was the suspect in the triple shooting that left one man dead and injured that 7-year-old girl. Take a look at your screen. Police say Anwar Wawa Phillips was shot early this morning, right around 6:45, over at the Essex Village apartment complex off Ingleside Drive in Henrico County. Neighbors say they heard 7 or 8 gunshots and then saw a man crawling out of the apartment building on your screen. Now, police tell us that Phillips did survive that shooting. He was taken to VCU Medical Center where he remains at this hour. Now, in this video, you're also going to see a man being whisked away in a police cruiser. Henrico police are calling that person a person of interest in this morning's shooting. They say everyone is accounted for that was involved in that shooting, and they will consult with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office about any potential charges that may come out. For neighbors in that area, area. They tell us they're just thankful no one else was around when those shots rang out early this morning.
Yeah, I'm glad one of those kids out here getting ready to go to school at that school bus stop because it's right there.
It's right by where this happened.
Yeah.
Anwar Phillips has spent most of his adult life of 30 years in prison. In fact, he was a felon, a convicted felon by age 18. And back in 2004, he shot a Richmond police officer after crashing a stolen van. The U.S. Marshals had offered a $5,000 reward for any information that would have led to his arrest. I am told by sources he remains in critical condition at VCU Medical Center. We'll have complete coverage of this major story all day today. Our John Burkett is following up on this. Tune in for his live report at 5 o'clock. Cheryl.
That next month of December, an officer arrested a 26-year-old man from Petersburg by the name of Jonathan P. Mosley, who was charged with conspiracy to commit murder in connection with Rolando's death, most likely being the driver. And with the help of Hanover County Sheriff's Office, an officer arrested a 24-year-old man named Jeffrey Marcus Jr., who was wanted in connection to Ashley's murder after spotting him at a small business. He was released into Richmond police custody and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. So it was official that Anwar had no parts in the woman's murder. That following year of 2016, in the month of January, Anwar would end up pleading guilty to 2 counts of murder, 1 count of malicious wounding, and was set to serve a total of 45 years in prison for all 3 charges. Now, the start of Anwar's incarceration would be him confined to a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. Throughout his bid, he trained his body faithfully, learning how to walk again, because his new handicap wouldn't stop him from assaulting not 1, but 3 correctional officers by hand and by stabbing them down. Afterward, he was transferred to a supermax called Red Onion, one of the 2 prisons that were considered the end of the line. We fast forward 6 long years later into Anwar's bid. By then, he had been in solitary confinement for a large amount of time, and the assault of those 3 COs were the main reason why. Now, above his mom, it wasn't too many people in Anwar's corner, and understandably so. But this childhood friend Mike, even after everything happened, he decided to lend his support, take his calls, and help him out whenever he could. In one of their last conversations, he'd say he was gaining strength back in his legs, being over-determined to walk again someday. But that day, it would never come.
Anwar Phillips would be discovered dead in his cell in January 2022, and questions would arise as to how a man in a single cell would obtain the items to end his own life. Authorities would allege that another man, William Pettigrew, would transfer a hand-braided rope to Phillips, who would then use it to take his own life. Pettigrew would be charged with murder, but after months of investigation, which included available surveillance footage, the charges would be dropped. There were also concerns that staff were not doing the required 40-minute checks on inmates in their cells. The mother of Phillips begged the media for answers, but it does not look like she will be getting any closure on the incident.
But it was widely said that Anwar wasn't the suicidal type, solely because of the pride he had, saying he was more likely to make someone else kill him first. The word spread that the guards purposely left the door unlocked so William could strangle him in his sleep, in which time he doctored the scene to make it look like a suicide. So it was always believed that William Pettigrew was the sole suspect, but not without it being contracted from the correctional officers who worked there. Nothing more than retaliation for their fellow co-workers. Further investigation into his death prompted officials to initiate a deep dive into the psychological effects that solitary can have on the mind, saying that Anwar's death was a reflection of a wider issue with the solitary confinement system in Virginia prisons like Red Onion. And it was proven that everything they said was factual, but in this case, it was thought to be nothing more than them making the point that we take care of our own. Before we end the story, there's one more tidbit to know. Now, maybe the authorities working the case knew this but couldn't prove it, so in turn they elected not to inform the public. But it's confirmed that Anwar actually had a number of other bodies under his belt. Names on his list that were crossed out, murders that he wasn't and never will be convicted for. So I got a message myself from telling this story, and it's that no matter where or what any of us come from, we all slaves to the same wants and needs in life. I would never justify a person's actions just because they had it hard. You still got a choice to not take a life. Yeah, I know why you're struggling. I even understand why you out here robbing folks, but nothing about it makes it right. But it's those kids growing up right now without that same sense of right or wrong. There's children out here living next door to you, go to school with your kids, speak when they see you on the street, that truly think that this is the way they supposed to live. I want to tell you a short story, and I won't keep you long, but I had this young dude about 14 years old, and I was like mentoring him. He didn't know that, but I knew what my intentions was. You know, one day we sitting down in my apartment in Blue Ridge, and he say, OG. Yeah, he used to call me OG. I won't number 25 years old at the time. He went on and said, OG, why you don't just kill them niggas that robbed you? You know, the city ain't that big the way you can't find out who did it. Man, you know these niggas out here run their mouth like hoes. Yeah, like he was advanced for his age. You know, carried himself like a cold veteran out here. Boy been out there in the streets since he was 8-9 years old. But this is what I tell him. I say, for one, I ain't no killer. But even if I had the heart to do that, I'm not just taking his life, you know, I'm taking my own. Either by me getting caught and doing 50 years or his people taking me out in revenge. Even though he was wrong first, it's on right or wrong to them. To anybody out there in the street, if you in the street. He look at me, he say, damn, OG, so you scared of them niggas? I say, you missing the point, my boy. Whether I'm scared or not, dead is dead. Everything you are, everything you want to be and could be, gone. And dead don't always mean you being buried. Nah, dead can be life in prison. Dead can mean your family members and friends start dropping because the people can't find you. So you never at peace. You know, you never safe, always paranoid, always wondering that one day I decide to go to the store, is they gonna catch me on my way back into the house? Nah, youngin', that ain't living for real. You just breathing on borrowed time. You gotta go to sleep. You gotta take a shower. You gotta eat. So, far as I'm concerned, I'm playing a game that I was never supposed to be in. I'm just looking for a way out. Man, I don't know, OG. I hear that shit you talking about, but dude got niggas out here think you weak or something. And I tell him, I said, look, that's exactly why you ain't gonna last too long out here. You keep letting other niggas' thoughts dictate how you think of yourself. Because I know I'm strong, even if they think otherwise. And he just looked at me, shook his head, said, all right, OG, fuck it, man. Look. Man, I dropped that motherfucker for you, man, cause you don't deserve that. I said, look, I just want you to make it home, little bro. You know what I'm saying? Just make it home. Go home, chill out. We dap up, he dip out. It wasn't too long before he ended up shooting somebody for real. Not on my behalf, but he did end up shooting somebody, and he ended up getting time, a good amount. After a couple of years, he got out. He hit me up and everything. He back out there. And now he gets shot. He recovered. He went back out there and went back to jail. But this time he went back to jail for real. I ain't seen him for a good minute. I just seen him 6-7 months ago. And let me tell you something. When he called me, that's when he decided to change. That's when he called me and told me, I wish I had listened to you, OG. That's when he realized that the boy or boys he was running with weren't worth the years shaved off his life. But as of today, all I'm hearing is good things, and I hope you stay in the course, little bro. And I hope y'all got the message. Rest in peace to the fallen, and y'all stay safe out there.